They took his title and slashed his hours, so he gave them exactly what they asked for. Hello and welcome back to the Karma Stories podcast. I'm Rob, and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Coming up today, we have a corporate genius with an MBA who tanks an entire project in record time, a kid who finds a perfect way to express his lunch critique, and some retail workers take cleanup duty to a whole new level. Let's jump right in. This story comes to us from BlueBoy714. Stripped of manager position? Okay, I can do that. This happened decades ago, but after reading another Malicious Compliance, I figured I'd post this. I was a manager of a programming department. I initially had 5 programmers reporting to me, and I was able to spend half of my time programming and half managing. I had always gotten exceeds or far exceeds expectations on my annual reviews. About 10 years later, my team had 25 people, and I was spending less and less time programming. Fast forward a few years, and I missed 2 months during the year for a surgery and hospital stay. And in my annual review, my boss, who knew nothing about programming, told me I was not doing a good job, and the programming department was missing deliverable dates, probably because I was in the hospital. They wanted me to go back to just programming, and I was stripped of my manager and only focus on programming. I was pissed off, but I told them that I can do that. I told my former staff what had happened and told them to direct all questions to my boss, who knew zero about programming. He was overwhelmed, and soon, senior management figured out that my boss was the problem, not me. They canned him and replaced him with the VP of programming in the UK. I am in the US. She was great since she started as a programmer and was an excellent boss in general. Since I was just a programmer now, all of the managers were in the UK, and I told my former staff to direct all questions to their new bosses in the UK. Since there was a 6-hour time difference and we only overlapped 2 or 3 hours each day, that made getting questions answered in a timely fashion quite difficult. In the meantime, my health wasn't the best, and my doctor told me I should go to a 4-day, 32-hour work week so my health wouldn't continue to suffer. Since my employer was a strict 40-hour-a-week company, I looked for another job and got 8 job offers in about a month. I was ready to resign. Finally, after a few months, my new boss asked me to be a manager again because of the time difference between US and UK, and because I had the most experience as a programmer in the company. Instead, I gave her my resignation and explained why. She asked me what it would take to get me to stay, and I told her I wanted a 10% raise and wanted to work a 4-day, 32-hour work week. I gave her 24 hours to respond. She spoke to the higher-ups and finally came back the next day and agreed. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called LonelyCoconut9734. It says, impressed that the company had people smart enough to realize that a mistake had been made, and they worked to resolve it. OP, it sounds to me like you sold yourself short in this situation because I think this would have been a 25% raise situation, even though you wanted to work less time. You were the person with all the experience. You were the person they needed in that spot. You could have asked for a lot more money. Sure, 10% is good, but I would have started much higher and maybe then agreed on something smaller, like 20%. Coming up next, one decision from a fresh-faced MBA nearly derails an entire rail project, and the cost? Let's just say it's not pocket change. This story comes to us from BillIM201. Don't want to pay 4 guys to not work for 6 hours? Okay, you can pay 30 guys to not work for 6 hours. To make an already long story as short as possible, some background. I am a manager for a North American railroad, and a lot of our work involves different crafts of employees. Different crafts have different unions and different work rules. The managers of the other crafts and I work together well to get done what we need to get done, especially when some of the work needs to get done at night. The track guys can have a crew assigned to nights, while the signal guys can't. Even better, the signal guys who work overnight have to be let go after 12 hours. And if it's now their regular shift because they came in last night, they get paid the rest of the day to go home and sleep. TAC guys have all 3 shifts, but we only have a day shift and an evening shift, but no night shift, because the big hats don't want to hire enough people to do it. Now, the company has decided that paying guys to go home 2 hours early on a Thursday, come in and work overtime all night at 10 p.m., and go home at 10 a.m., getting another 4 hours pay to go home and sleep, is the ending of all that is good and pure in the universe, and will eventually lead to the collapse of capitalism, the nation, and indeed, the universe itself. So they decide that the second shift guys have to stay 4 extra hours, and the first shift guys have to come in 4 hours early. I point out that, 1, I can't force employees to work overtime unless it's an emergency, and the union isn't likely to agree that we want to do this at night so we don't affect traffic is an emergency. 2, not all employees are qualified on the same things. 3, since they took half of my trucks away 5 years ago because savings, I don't have enough vehicles for an entire second crew to show up at 2 a.m. and relieve the guys working in the field so they can go home. The guys currently working will have to stop work, pack up the tools, drive back to the office, let the smaller relief crew load up, drive back out to the worksite, do the starting paperwork and briefings, and begin the work. And most importantly, 4, that while we aren't there, the track guys can't work because we have to keep taking things off of the rail so that the track guys can do their work, and then put them back when the guys are done so we can run the trains in the morning. All of it falls on deaf ears because the freckle-faced college kid who opens every conversation with, "I have an MBA, darn it," who has somehow gotten to a position where he's in charge of the estimates, wants to complain about those 24 hours a night. So, after having gone on the meeting record for all of it, I get out of the kid's way. I decide that if my boss isn't going to have my back, I'm not going to stop this inevitable disaster. After all, I've only been doing this for 27 years, but he graduated with a 3.6 GPA from the University of Texas at El Paso, so he must know better. So, the first night, the job grinds to a halt like clockwork at 1 a.m. The second crew shows up at about 4:15, and they get to work. The track folks pack it in because by the time anything gets dismantled, there won't be enough time to get anything done and put it all back together to start moving trains by 7. Second night, the shift change was a little smoother, so they got out of there at 3:45, managed to get a little work done before packing up. Third and fourth night, it rained really hard, so the drive back to the shop and out to the job site took extra time. No work done after the new crew showed up at 4:30. Bright and early Monday morning, we show up at our morning meeting to find that the track guys got about 30% of the work done that they'd planned for the week, and at this pace would finish a 6-week job more than 15 weeks behind, and over budget by more than 300%. Mr. MBA proceeds to launch into his carefully rehearsed speech about key metrics, percent spend versus percent complete, and all sorts of other nonsense. He then decides to start in on me, since I obviously conspired and colluded with my employees to egregiously erode progress for an entire week. I held up the meeting minutes from the previous week. I told him in no uncertain terms that he had asked, in fact demanded, that we had a full shift change in the middle of the track department's work. I looked across the table at him and asked him if he wanted to revise that position. Completely unwilling to let this lowly engineer tell him what to do, he said no, and I was supposed to somehow magically make the shift change faster. Next 3 weeks were the same story. They've now been out there for a month and have managed to accomplish just shy of a week and a half of work. Mr. MBA shows up on the site one night just in time to watch my night guys walk off, watch the track guys shut down the machines, and gather outside to smoke, hang out, and generally carouse because they now know they have 3 hours to screw off and be paid for it. My guys had called me when Mr. MBA showed up, so I get out of bed and get to the job site just in time to see this guy in his shiny, fresh from the package safety gear screaming at the top of his lungs to the guys to get back in their equipment and get the naughty word back to work. They all refuse because they all know that they can't work without us there. Not that they care all that much about our equipment, but because they know Mr. MBA has been throwing a little too much weight around, and nothing makes union employees stick together better or faster than putting the screws to a manager who really needs it. I walk up during a profanity-laced tirade and cut right in and say, "Well, Mr. MBA, I'm sure you're not suggesting that these qualified employees violate Rule XX, which clearly states that they shall not, under any circumstances, run that equipment through a switch that the signal department hasn't checked, would you? That would be a serious violation, and could get him a 30-day suspension without pay. And if you were to suggest that he do that, you wouldn't have a union card in your pocket, and he would have 30 witnesses that saw you give him that directive. So you wouldn't be suggesting that, would you? He turned 3 shades of purple, stomped back to his little white company sedan, and drove away. He held on to his asinine mid-shift shift change for another 2 weeks until he couldn't hide the massive production delays from his boss anymore. And suddenly, he wasn't in charge of the estimates anymore. The total cost of his little venture? Just over $940,000 over the course of 6 weeks. But he did manage to save $700 a night on those off hours that he didn't have to pay for. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Cool Beans Chili. It says, whenever he tries to give you an order, just ask him, "Oh, so you want me to waste another $1 million?" Opie responded and said, "For some reason, he doesn't work in our department anymore. For the life of me, I can't imagine why." Does anybody else think that the requirement for an MBA should include having a tattoo on their arm that says, "Make sure you know how stuff works and why it works before you make any changes"? Seriously though, an MBA can be good for some people and it definitely looks good on a resume, but for a lot of those people, MBA stands for Master of BS and Arrogance. Next up, not all acts of malicious compliance come from the workplace. Sometimes they happen right at the kitchen table. This story comes to us from Rigby Lou. The food is bad. My son has some special needs and is a reluctant reader and writer. He has never before taken initiative to read or write on his own. He is so enthusiastic about lots of other parts of learning. He is in OT and speech and has an IEP. He is, however, very gifted at finding the loophole in everything. It's entertaining and exasperating, and sometimes I'm just in awe. I made him lunch today, some chicken, rice, fresh fruit, and some snap peas, all things he normally likes. I thought it was a nice lunch. While he was eating, I had to make a call to schedule an appointment. He said, "I don't like this tastes bad, I want something else, I don't want this for lunch." Since I was on the phone, I said, "Eat what you can please, I'm on the phone, and I don't want to hear you complain about your lunch again." He was very quiet for the next few minutes as I finished up my call. Then he handed me a piece of paper. My kid, who has never wanted to read or write, who I often have to sit with and do it with him the entire time, wrote for the first time on his own. It was a passive-aggressive note. He wrote for the first time to make a complaint. The note says, "The food is bad." I'm really proud and a little offended, but mostly proud. And, technically, I had not heard him complain about his lunch again. So, I'm not able to attach a photo of the note here, but I hung it on the fridge and told him I was very proud of him for writing it all by himself. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Jam on it. It says, "I like the way he thinks. He was still able to complain and you didn't have to hear about it. Combined with the proud parent moment to remember, this is a sweet story." Did anybody else on this one think that after OP told him to eat whatever he can, that he was going to go and loot the kitchen and get whatever food he wanted and just leave the stuff that OP made on the table? In all seriousness though, I really do hope this is an opening door moment for OP's son and that they'll continue to write more in the future. Even if it's just to go against what their parents said, it still works. In our final story, sometimes when management gives unclear instructions, the best move is to follow them exactly, tools and all. This story comes to us from Servant Girl 789. We have to take apart the old displays? Okay. In 1989, I worked for the planogram team at my local Target. We set up and took apart store displays and fixtures, which included product label updates and building out new display models. In February, we were assigned 6 weeks of overnight shifts to completely gut and then replace the home goods and furniture, hardware and automotive, and toys departments. Management promised us extra help and plenty of time to take down the huge furniture flats and rebuilds in the home goods, which had heavy display models, and were elevated onto huge precast shelves. Anyone who's ever worked in retail knows what I'm referring to. Management did nothing, and our new plans for the displays were to be given to us before we even started, and they were continually late. Toys and hardware automotive were fine. We finished those with no extra help within a day of when they were to be finished. The home goods and furniture plans were given to my boss at the start of our shift, along with the deadline of having everything finished in one night, which meant removing the old display models, taking them in tubs to the trash compactor, removing the shelves, along with the industrial carpet that was glued to the shelves, and clean the shelves before they were shipped off to another store, taking apart the furniture for the trash compactor so it would be easier to destroy in the compactor, building the new furniture displays, and putting them up on the new furniture flats. We were promised that we'd have 4 to 6 employees to help us that night, since a lot of the furniture was heavy, bookshelves and desks. We got F all. My supervisor, Dolores, was pissed, and rightfully so. We were left with a note to get all of that work done within our allotted shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Conveniently, the GM and other AMs were gone for the night, and no one answered Dolores' phone calls. Dolores was a big woman, former army vet, 6'2" tall, and built like a tank. I'd never seen her so angry, or even angry until that night. There were only 5 of us to do the work of 10 to 12 people. I watched Dolores climb up on one of the furniture flats, wait a moment, then, while looking straight into the security camera, kicked a fake cherrywood end table off the flat, and then jumped down on the flat. It splintered into several pieces. She then proceeded to stomp those pieces into many little pieces. OP, she said, what did it say to do with the old display models? I checked the list. It says to disassemble them and then take the pieces to the compactor so they'll be easier to compact. Dolores gestured to the flats. Team, that's what we're going to do. So I climbed up and knocked down a 3-shelf particle board bookcase with a fake walnut finish. It fell flat. I then jumped on the back of the case and broke through the particle board back. I then took my hammer and started smashing the sides of the bookcase. It came apart instantly. For the next 45 minutes, we climbed up on each one of those furniture flats, knocked down the displays, and destroyed them all. We had so much fun. It was extremely therapeutic. We then swept up the remains and put them into 2 tubs and left them by the compactor. We did manage to get the old displays down and put the new ones up. We were unable to remove the carpet from the old shelves as it was glued down, and we didn't have any solvents to use. We also left the new displays in their boxes as there was no time to put them together. Dolores waited until the morning AM showed up and then tore the guy a new one before leaving. When I came to work that night, the new furniture was already put together and up on the new displays. We were also given an apology by the regional manager, who Dolores called that day to let him know we'd been screwed over with an impossible deadline, and given a free pizza dinner for our trouble. I left Target 2 months later and moved out of state. Dolores retired 6 months later. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Wild Frosty. It says, Dolores didn't just follow instructions, she interpreted them with righteous fury. OSHA may not approve, but I do. Gotta love when bad instructions come back to bite the boss, and hey, they get a pizza party, so that's kind of a win, right? Because everybody wants pizza and not like a bonus or anything. If you enjoyed today's stories, make sure to follow us on the podcast, and if you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.